The golden facade, Josephine Winters, adjusted her husband's bow tie with practiced fingers, the gesture so familiar after 15 years of marriage that she could perform it with her eyes closed. Vincent stood perfectly still, his trademark patience on display as she fussed with the silk. "There," she said, stepping back to admire her work. "Perfect as always." Vincent caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "What would I do without you, Joe?" The question hung between them, rhetorical and comfortable. What would the great Vincent Winters, revolutionary tech entrepreneur, philanthropist, and darling of Silicon Valley, do without his steadfast wife? The answer, according to the glossy magazine profiles and televised interviews, was simple. He would be incomplete. Josephine smiled and reached for her clutch purse. Tonight was the quarterly board dinner for the Winters Foundation, the philanthropic organization she and Vincent had built from the ground up 7 years ago. Its mission, funding innovative education technology for underprivileged communities, had become her passion project. The thing that gave her purpose beyond being Mrs. Vincent Winters. "The car should be waiting," Vincent said, checking his watch, a sleek, understated timepiece worth more than most people's yearly salary. "Shall we?" Their penthouse overlooked the glittering San Francisco Bay, the lights of the city below like fallen stars. As they descended in the private elevator, Josephine caught their reflection in the mirrored walls. Vincent, tall and distinguished at 45, silver threading elegantly through his dark hair, and herself, still turning heads at 42, honey blonde hair swept into a classic updo, emerald dress complementing her hazel eyes. They looked perfect. They always did. "Roland confirmed the Anderson donation," Vincent said, scrolling through messages on his phone. $10 million for the South America Initiative." "That's wonderful," Josephine replied, genuinely pleased. The foundation's expansion into international territories had been her suggestion, one that Vincent had initially resisted but eventually championed as his own vision. She was used to that dynamic. The restaurant was exclusive, tucked away on the top floor of a historic building with views that rivaled their penthouse. Board members and their spouses rose as Vincent and Josephine entered, conversations pausing in deference to their arrival. Handshakes, air kisses, practiced smiles, the choreography of wealth and influence that Josephine knew by heart. "Josephine, darling," purred Eleanor Blackwood, the foundation's marketing director. "That dress is divine." "Valentino?" "Good eye," Josephine replied warmly. "Last season's collection." "Last season and still ahead of the curve," Eleanor said with a theatrical wink. "That's our Joe." Dinner proceeded with the usual precision. Impeccable service, exquisite food, and conversation that waltzed between philanthropy, politics, and carefully curated personal anecdotes. Vincent commanded the table effortlessly, his charisma drawing everyone into his orbit. Josephine watched him with practiced admiration, playing her role as the supportive wife. Yet something felt different tonight. Perhaps it was the way his phone kept lighting up with notifications he swiftly dismissed. Or how his laugh seemed to carry a hint of tension that only she, after 15 years, could detect. When Vincent excused himself halfway through the main course, Josephine noted he took his phone. He returned 17 minutes later, she had counted, with a barely perceptible change in his demeanor. His cologne seemed fresher as if recently applied. "Everything okay?" she asked quietly when he settled beside her. "Just putting out fires at the office," he replied, squeezing her hand reassuringly. "The Nexus project launch is next month." She nodded, accepting the explanation as she always did. Vincent worked hard. His success demanded it. The late nights, the weekend emergencies, the sudden business trips. These were the prices of building an empire. Later, as coffee was served, the conversation turned to the upcoming Emerald Gala, the Foundation's annual fundraising event, where Vincent would be receiving a humanitarian award for his contributions to educational equality. "We've already sold out," announced Roland Peters, the Foundation's treasurer. "Every ticket, every sponsorship. It'll be our biggest event yet. The jewelry auction alone should raise $2 million, added Eleanor. "Vincent, I understand you've commissioned something special this year?" Josephine looked at her husband with surprise. This was news to her. Vincent's smile didn't falter. Yes, something unique. An emerald piece from Cartier, a one-of-a-kind design. How exciting, Josephine said, her voice even. You didn't mention it. I wanted it to be a surprise, Vincent replied smoothly. For the gala. She nodded, but something in his eyes, a flicker of something unreadable, caught her attention. After 15 years, Josephine knew when Vincent was holding something back. The realization sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the restaurant's air conditioning. As conversations continued around them, Josephine found herself studying her husband with new eyes. The confident set of his shoulders, the practiced charm of his smile, the way he engaged with everyone at the table except, somehow, her. For the first time in their marriage, Josephine wondered if the perfect reflection they cast was just that, a reflection. Beautiful but flat, present but ultimately without substance. The thought followed her home that night, lingering as Vincent took a late business call in his study while she prepared for bed alone. It whispered in her ear as she heard him finally enter their bedroom at 2 a.m., smelling faintly of scotch and secrets. And it was there in the morning light as she watched him sleep. His face relaxed and vulnerable in a way it never was when he was awake. When she reached for his phone and, for the first time in 15 years, decided to look. Whispers in the shadows, the numbers didn't add up. Josephine stared at her laptop screen, shoulders tense as she cross-referenced the Foundation's financial statements with the notes she'd taken during her clandestine exploration of Vincent's phone. 3 months had passed since that first night of doubt, and what began as a fleeting suspicion had crystallized into methodical investigation. She'd found text messages to someone saved simply as NR, brief, cryptic exchanges about meetings and arrangements. More telling were the Foundation expense reports Vincent had approved personally. Payments to a consulting firm called Reed Innovations for special project development, a company that, according to her research, had materialized just 18 months ago with virtually no online presence. Mrs. Winters? Her assistant Daphne appeared in the doorway of Josephine's home office. Mr. Harrison from the event planning committee is online too about the Emerald Gala seating arrangements. Thank you, Daphne. Tell him I'll call back in 20 minutes. Josephine minimized the spreadsheet and rubbed her temples. The gala was 3 weeks away, and while she normally threw herself into the planning with enthusiasm, this year her mind was elsewhere. After Daphne left, Josephine reopened her research. Reed Innovations had received nearly $800,000 in consulting fees over the past year. The company's registered address led to a luxury apartment building in Pacific Heights. The listed principal was Natalia Reed. Josephine's throat tightened as she stared at the woman's professional headshot, striking amber eyes, elegant bone structure, and dark hair that fell in perfect waves. According to her sparse LinkedIn profile, Natalia Reed had previously worked at a tech rival of Vincent's before starting her own consulting business. Her client list included only the Winters Foundation. The Emerald Necklace Commission suddenly made sense. Vincent had requested a custom piece from Cartier with specific instructions about the design and stone selection. Josephine had contacted her friend at Cartier under the pretense of wanting to see her husband's surprise contribution to the auction. The description she received made her heart sink, an emerald pendant designed to nestle in the hollow of a throat. Surrounded by diamonds in a pattern that resembled intertwined initials, V and N, not V and J, Josephine closed her laptop and moved to the window overlooking the garden. The foundation had been her pride, her purpose. She'd organized the first fundraiser in their living room 7 years ago, had personally vetted every program they funded. While Vincent provided the vision and connections, she had built the foundation's reputation for integrity. Her phone buzzed with a text from Vincent. Meeting running late. Don't wait up. The familiar message that once inspired sympathy now rang hollow. She didn't reply. That evening, instead of dining alone, Josephine drove to Pacific Heights. The doorman at the luxury apartment building barely glanced at her as she confidently walked through the marble lobby toward the elevators. Her research had identified apartment 1102 as registered to Reed Innovations. She had no plan beyond confirming her suspicions. Perhaps that was why she froze when the elevator doors opened on the 11th floor, and she found herself face to face with Natalia Reed herself. Recognition flashed in the younger woman's eyes, followed quickly by alarm. "Mrs. Winters," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. I suppose this was inevitable. Josephine maintained her composure through sheer force of will. "Ms. Reed, I believe we have something to discuss." Natalia hesitated, then nodded. "Please come in." The apartment was minimalist and elegant, not the gaudy space of a kept woman, but the sophisticated home of someone with genuine taste. What caught Josephine's attention, however, were the framed foundation documents on the wall, original proposals she had helped draft, but with significant modifications. "You're not just sleeping with my husband," Josephine said, the realization dawning. "You're helping him divert foundation funds." Natalia didn't deny it. "He told me you had stepped back from day-to-day operations, that you'd approved the Special Projects Division." "There is no Special Projects Division," Josephine replied coldly, "at least not one the board knows about." Something like shame crossed Natalia's face. He said the money was going to experimental education initiatives that weren't ready for public scrutiny. "I believed him because—" She trailed off. "Because you wanted to," Josephine finished for her. "I understand the impulse." They stared at each other, two intelligent women who had both been deceived in different ways. "The emerald necklace," Josephine said finally. "He commissioned it for you." Natalia looked genuinely surprised. "I don't know anything about a necklace." Before Josephine could respond, her phone rang, Vincent's ringtone. She declined the call. "I should go," she said, turning toward the door. "Mrs. Winters," Natalia called after her. "What will you do?" Josephine paused, her hand on the doorknob. "What I should have done a long time ago," she answered. "Ask the right questions." Back in her car, Josephine sat motionless, processing everything. Her phone buzzed again, not Vincent this time, but an email notification. The Cartier Atelier was confirming the final details for the emerald piece to be delivered to the Foundation's office the day before the gala. Vincent had given specific instructions. The necklace was to be a showcase piece, worn during the event by a Foundation representative before being auctioned. As she started the engine, an idea began to form, one that made her heart race with equal parts fear and determination. The next morning, she called an old friend from her days as a financial analyst before she'd set aside her career to support Vincent's. "Patricia, I need a favor," she said when her friend answered. "A confidential audit of the Winters Foundation, and I need it before the Emerald Gala." The Emerald Revelation. The Emerald Gala transformed the San Francisco Art Museum into an ethereal woodland dream. Vines of twinkling lights cascaded from the ceiling, tables adorned with lush centerpieces of ferns and white orchids, emerald accent lighting casting everything in a mysterious glow. 500 of the city's elite mingled beneath Renaissance paintings, champagne flutes catching the light as servers glided between conversations with practiced invisibility. In the preparation suite, Josephine sat alone before a gilded mirror. She had dismissed her usual styling team, preferring solitude for what would come next. Her reflection showed a woman transformed, not by the elegant black gown or the sophisticated updo, but by the resolute clarity in her eyes. Patricia's audit had confirmed everything. Over $2 million diverted through Reed Innovations to offshore accounts, falsified reports to the board, and evidence that Vincent had been laying groundwork to transition Foundation control entirely away from Josephine through carefully worded amendments she'd signed without thorough review. The betrayal went beyond the personal. It struck at the very heart of the work she'd dedicated years to building. The velvet box from Cartier sat before her, delivered as scheduled to the Foundation office and intercepted by Josephine before Vincent could arrange its showcase presentation. She opened it now, the emerald and diamond necklace catching the light with breathtaking beauty. The intertwined V and N were subtly worked into the design, visible only when one knew to look for them. Her phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "In position with the documents." "Are you sure about this?" Josephine replied with a single word. "Yes." She fastened the necklace around her throat, the weight of the gems nothing compared to the burden of her knowledge. The emerald nestled precisely where it was designed to rest, in the hollow of Natalia Reed's throat, not hers. The irony was not lost on Josephine. Vincent would be mid-speech by now. The humanitarian award presentation always came after the main course but before the auction. Perfect timing. As Josephine entered the main hall, she moved unnoticed at first, skirting the perimeter where shadows provided cover. Vincent's voice carried throughout the space, confident and compelling as he spoke about transparency, integrity, and the Foundation's commitment to honest stewardship of donor funds. "Which is why I'm proud to announce our new international initiative," he was saying, "bringing educational technology to communities that have been systematically overlooked. Your generosity tonight will directly impact thousands of young lives across—" Vincent stopped mid-sentence as Josephine emerged into the light. The emerald at her throat caught the stage lighting, sending prismatic reflections dancing across the walls. A murmur rippled through the crowd as recognition dawned. This was not part of the planned program. "Josephine!" Vincent recovered quickly, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen, my wife has made a surprise appearance wearing the signature piece from tonight's auction. A wonderful preview of what you'll be bidding on later." Josephine walked steadily toward the stage, each step deliberate. The room fell silent as she climbed the 3 stairs to stand beside her husband. "Vincent is partly right," she said, her voice clear and steady as she took the microphone. "This necklace is indeed meant to be a statement piece, but not in the way he intended." Confusion flickered across Vincent's face, followed by the first hint of alarm as he noticed Patricia entering from the side, carrying a leather portfolio. "The Winters Foundation was built on a promise," Josephine continued, addressing the rapt audience. "A promise to operate with absolute transparency and to direct every dollar toward educational opportunity. It's why so many of you have given so generously over the years." She touched the emerald at her throat. "This necklace tells a different story. One of funds diverted, trust betrayed, and a foundation used as a vehicle for personal gain." Vincent moved toward her, reaching for the microphone, but Josephine stood firm. "The necklace was commissioned using foundation funds, but it was never meant for auction. The design—" She projected an enlarged image of the pendant onto the screens flanking the stage, highlighting the intertwined initials. "Tells us exactly who it was meant for," gasps rippled through the audience as Patricia distributed copies of the audit findings to key board members in the front. "Oh, what you'll find in those documents," Josephine continued, her voice unwavering, "is evidence of systematic financial manipulation. Over $2 million funneled through a shell company called Reed Innovations, registered to Natalia Reed, with whom my husband has been conducting both business and personal affairs for the past 18 months. Vincent's face had gone ashen. "Josephine, this is not the place." "It's exactly the place," she cut him off, her composure in stark contrast to his growing panic. "These people have trusted us with their money and their faith. They deserve to know that while you spoke of building schools, you were building secret accounts. While you claimed to champion education, you were educating yourself on creative accounting." She unclasped the necklace and held it up, the gems catching the light. "I'm not here to air personal grievances, Vincent. I'm here because what you've done isn't just a betrayal of our marriage, it's a betrayal of everything this foundation stands for." The room had gone completely still. Hundreds of San Francisco's wealthiest citizens frozen in collective shock. Roland Peters, the treasurer, was already flipping through the audit with growing horror. Eleanor Blackwood had her hand pressed to her mouth. "The board will need to conduct its own investigation," Josephine said, addressing the audience again. "And I trust the appropriate authorities will do the same. As for this," she placed the necklace on the podium, "I suggest it be the first asset liquidated to restore funds to their proper purpose." She turned to leave, but Vincent grasped her arm. "You have no idea what you've done," he hissed, quiet enough that only she could hear. Josephine looked at him calmly. "I know exactly what I've done. I've chosen truth over comfort." "Something you might have considered." She walked off the stage, head high, leaving Vincent to face the audience alone. The silence broke into a cacophony of whispers and exclamations as she made her way through the crowd. Some faces showed shock, others sympathy, still others calculation as the city's elite processed the implications of what they'd witnessed. Outside, the cool night air filled her lungs as Josephine finally allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. Her hands trembled as she texted Patricia, "It's done." The reply came instantly, "You were magnificent. Car is waiting around the corner." As she walked away from the museum, Josephine felt the weight of 15 years lifting from her shoulders. Tomorrow would bring chaos, legal questions, media scrutiny, the dismantling of the life she had known. But for the first time in months, she could breathe freely. The emerald was no longer at her throat, and neither was the lie. Aftermath and ashes. 3 months after the Emerald Gala, Josephine sat across from her attorney in a downtown conference room, watching autumn rain trace patterns on the window. The legal aftermath of Vincent's misdeeds had consumed her days. Depositions, financial forensics, negotiations with the foundation board. Today marked a milestone. The final settlement conference before her divorce from Vincent would be finalized. "He's agreeing to everything," said Howard Greenberg, pushing his glasses up his nose as he reviewed the documents. "Full financial disclosure, equitable division of assets, no contest to your restoration as foundation chairperson. Frankly, it's the most cooperative I've seen a high-profile divorce in 30 years of practice." "He has no choice," Josephine replied, tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "The foundation board agreed not to pursue criminal charges if he made full restitution. His reputation is all he has left to salvage." The scandal had dominated business news for weeks. Vincent Winters, tech visionary and philanthropist, exposed for financial impropriety and moral bankruptcy. He had retreated from public life, issuing only a carefully worded statement about personal and professional misjudgments and his commitment to making amends. Natalia Reed had disappeared entirely. The last Josephine heard, she had left the country for Europe, her part in the scheme apparently more unwitting than malicious. Vincent had been the architect, Natalia merely a willing tool who believed at least some of his lies. "There's something else," Howard said, sliding a sealed envelope across the table. "He asked that I give you this personally, not part of the legal proceedings." Josephine eyed the envelope warily. Vincent's handwriting was instantly recognizable, the confident strokes of a man accustomed to having his signature mean something. "I'll leave you to decide whether you want to read it," Howard said, gathering his papers. "The judge will approve the final decree on Friday. After that, it's officially over." When she was alone, Josephine opened the envelope. Vincent's letter was brief. "Joe, you were right about everything. I lost sight of what mattered. The work, our vision, you. Success became a game I couldn't stop playing. Even when the stakes became contemptible. The necklace was commissioned when I still believed I could have everything. You, the foundation, and my other life with Natalia, it represents the worst of my delusions. I've instructed Cartier to recast it according to your specifications. Whatever you create from those stones will be more worthy than what I designed. I know better than to ask forgiveness." Vincent Josephine folded the letter carefully and returned it to the envelope. There was a time when his words would have moved her, when she might have searched for the man she married somewhere in those sentences. Now, she felt nothing but a distant sadness for what had been lost. Not just their marriage, but her own years of unquestioning trust. The buzzer on the conference room phone interrupted her thoughts. "Mrs. Winters, there's a Miss Patricia Hodges here to see you. She says you're expecting her?" "Yes, please send her in." Patricia entered with her characteristic efficiency, carrying a sleek leather portfolio and wearing a smile that had supported Josephine through the darkest days of the scandal. "How did it go?" she asked, taking the seat Howard had vacated. "As expected. It's nearly over." Josephine pushed the letter aside. "You brought the proposals?" Patricia nodded, opening her portfolio. 3 options for the new foundation structure. I've highlighted the differences in governance and focus areas. They spent the next hour reviewing documents, not Vincent's creative accounting this time, but the blueprint for something new. The Winters Foundation would continue under restructured leadership, its mission refocused and its operations transparent. But Josephine had also been developing a separate initiative, one that would bear her maiden name, the Thorne Institute for Financial Literacy. "The irony isn't lost on me," Josephine said as they reviewed the mission statement. "Using my settlement to fund education about financial independence and the warning signs of exploitation." "It's not irony. It's poetic justice," Patricia countered. "And it's going to help thousands of women who might otherwise end up in similar situations." As they worked, Josephine felt a familiar energy returning, the same passion that had fueled her early career before she'd set it aside for Vincent's ambitions. The difference now was that her vision belonged entirely to her. Later, as they walked together toward the waterfront for lunch, Patricia asked the question Josephine had been avoiding. "Have you decided about the stones?" The emerald and diamonds from the necklace had indeed been returned to Cartier at Vincent's instruction, awaiting her design decisions. She had considered selling them and adding the proceeds to her foundation's seed funding, but something held her back. "I'm meeting with the designer tomorrow," Josephine admitted. "I'm thinking of something completely different from the original. Not a necklace at all." "Whatever you choose, it should be spectacular," Patricia said. "A statement piece for your new beginning." Josephine smiled, the first genuine smile in months. "That's exactly what I have in mind." The waterfront restaurant was crowded with business lunches, but their reserved table offered privacy and views of the bay. As they settled in, Josephine noticed a familiar face at a distant table, Roland Peters, the foundation's treasurer, deep in conversation with a potential donor. He caught her eye and nodded. Respectfully, one of the few board members who had immediately supported her return to leadership. "The inaugural event for the Thorne Institute needs to make a statement," Patricia was saying. "Something that establishes your independent vision right from the start." Josephine considered this as she watched the sunlight play across the water. "I was thinking about that. What if we held it on the anniversary of the Emerald Gala? Not to remind people of the scandal, but to mark how much can change in a year." "Perfect symmetry," Patricia agreed. "And who will you invite?" "Everyone," Josephine replied with newfound confidence. "Including Vincent." Patricia raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure that's wise?" "It's not about wisdom," Josephine said. "It's about standing in my own power. I don't want to hide from the past or pretend it didn't happen. I want to acknowledge it and show exactly how far I've come." As their lunch arrived, conversation turned to practical matters, venue options, potential board members, the timing of the public announcement. The details that once would have overwhelmed Josephine now energized her. Each decision was a step toward reclaiming not just her professional identity, but her sense of self. By the time they parted ways that afternoon, the rain had cleared and weak sunlight brightened the city. Josephine declined Patricia's offer of a ride, choosing instead to walk the 15 blocks to her new apartment, a sleek, modern space overlooking the bay, as different from the penthouse she'd shared with Vincent as possible. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. The preliminary website design for the Thorne Institute was ready for her review. The subject line read simply, "Your vision realized." Josephine smiled as she tucked the phone away. That was exactly what the coming year would be about. Phoenix rising 1 year to the day after the Emerald Gala that had changed everything. Josephine stood at the entrance to the San Francisco Modern Art Museum's sculpture garden, watching guests arrive for the inaugural gala of the Thorne Institute for Financial Literacy. The setting sun bathed everything in golden light, reflecting off the glass walls of the pavilion where tables were arranged around a small stage. "Everything is perfect," said Patricia, appearing at her side with a tablet displaying the final attendance list. 342 confirmed guests, 90% of our fundraising goal already met through advance pledges. Josephine nodded, surveying the space with quiet pride. White roses and golden orchids adorned each table, the Institute's logo, a stylized phoenix, projected onto one wall. "No emerald theme this year," This evening was about transformation, not gems. Has he arrived? Josephine asked, though she didn't need to specify who. Patricia checked her tablet. Just checked in. He came alone. The knowledge settled in Josephine's chest, neither painful nor particularly significant. Vincent's presence tonight was symbolic, acknowledgement of the journey rather than a reopening of old wounds. Then I suppose it's time, Josephine said, smoothing the lines of her gold dress, a deliberate choice, the color of new beginnings. She moved through the gathering with practiced ease, greeting donors and community partners, accepting congratulations and fielding questions about the Institute's programs. The first 6 months of operations had exceeded expectations, with financial literacy workshops reaching over 2,000 women and an online resource hub that had gone viral among college students. She spotted Vincent at the periphery of the main gathering, looking somewhat diminished in his bespoke suit. The scandal had taken its toll. While he had avoided criminal charges, his professional reputation had suffered significantly. The tech company he'd built had replaced him as CEO, and his once constant presence in industry publications had dwindled to occasional mentions. Their eyes met across the space, and he inclined his head in acknowledgement. Josephine returned the gesture before turning her attention to the board members gathering near the stage. There would be time to address that particular ghost later. As the evening progressed through dinner and the initial presentations, Josephine felt a sense of completion forming. Patricia delivered a compelling overview of the Institute's mission, followed by testimonials from early program participants, women who had escaped financial abuse, young professionals who had avoided predatory lending schemes, single mothers who had established their first investment accounts. When it came time for Josephine's address, she approached the podium with steady confidence. The audience fell silent, many remembering the last time she had taken a stage unexpectedly. 1 year ago, she began, her voice clear in the perfect acoustics of the pavilion. I stood before many of you and spoke an uncomfortable truth. Tonight, I want to speak about what happens after truth-telling, the harder, longer work of rebuilding. She outlined the Institute's accomplishments and ambitious goals for the coming year. New partnerships with community colleges, expanding workshops to rural areas, developing curriculum for high school students. The statistics and projections were impressive, but what captured the audience was the underlying narrative of renewal. Financial literacy isn't just about understanding money, Josephine continued. It's about understanding power. When we know how to recognize manipulation, demand transparency, and value our own worth, we create lives that can't be easily undermined. As she spoke, she was acutely aware of Vincent in the audience, his expression unreadable. Yet his presence no longer defined her story. He was merely one chapter in a longer narrative she was still writing. The phoenix in our logo isn't just decorative, she said, gesturing to the emblem glowing on the wall behind her. It represents what happens when we allow ourselves to rise from the ashes of what no longer serves us. When we trust that what comes next can be more authentic than what came before. As she concluded her speech to enthusiastic applause, Josephine touched the custom-designed brooch pinned at her shoulder, a phoenix crafted from the repurposed emerald and diamonds of Vincent's necklace. The stones that were meant to symbolize deceit had been transformed into an emblem of rebirth. The gala continued with an auction and dancing, the atmosphere celebratory as donation pledges exceeded expectations. Josephine circulated among guests, accepting congratulations and discussing future collaborations until she found herself alone on the terrace, taking a moment of quiet reflection. Impressive work, came Vincent's voice from behind her. The Institute will help many people. Josephine turned to face her ex-husband, noting the subtle signs of aging that a year of disgrace had etched into his features. That's the intention, the phoenix, Vincent said, nodding toward her brooch. Cartier did an exceptional job with the redesign. They did, Josephine agreed. Some materials are worth salvaging even after they've been misused. The double meaning wasn't lost on Vincent. He smiled faintly. I deserved that. It wasn't meant as a barb, Josephine replied honestly. Just an observation. They stood in silence for a moment, the music from inside creating a soundtrack to their first real conversation in a year. "I hear the Winters Foundation is doing well under the new structure," she said finally. Vincent nodded. "The board has implemented every one of your recommended changes. Transparency reports, external audits, community representation. It's becoming what it should have been from the start." "I'm glad," Josephine said, and meant it. The foundation's work had always been important to her, even if her role in it had changed. "Josephine," Vincent began, his voice taking on an earnestness she recognized from their early years together. "I know it doesn't change anything, but I want you to know how deeply I—" She raised a hand, stopping him. "Don't. Not tonight. This evening isn't about apologies or the past. It's about what comes next." Vincent studied her face, seeming to truly see her for the first time in years. "You've found your purpose." "I've reclaimed it," she corrected gently. "It was always there." From inside, Patricia appeared at the doorway. "Josephine, the mayor has arrived and would like to speak with you about the municipal partnership." "I'll be right there." Josephine turned back to Vincent. "I should go." He nodded, understanding the multiple layers of her statement. "Of course." As she moved to leave, Vincent spoke once more. "The Phoenix suits you, Joe. It always did." Josephine paused, considering his words. Then she smiled. Not for him, but for herself and the journey that had led her here. "Goodbye, Vincent." She rejoined the gala, stepping back into the light and music and possibility. The night stretched ahead, filled with conversations about future projects and expanding horizons. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to help women stand firmly in their own power. The emerald at her shoulder caught the light as she moved. Transformed from a symbol of betrayal into an emblem of rebirth, like Josephine herself, it had emerged from darkness into something more authentic, more valuable, more true. And that, she knew, was the most precious transformation of all.